Well, it seems like it's been a while since we've been together, hasn't it? We've been looking at Paul's command to the Romans: accept one another, just as Christ has accepted you. We looked at how we could accept someone without necessarily agreeing with them. We looked at how do we accept someone whose behaviors we can't condone. I told us that acceptance wasn't agreement, nor was it mere tolerance, putting up with the other person despite their behavior. I know that carries with it a condescension. We used to talk about hating the sin but loving the sinner, but somehow over the years we've combined those two and we've ended up hating both. How do we accept people whose behaviors we have difficulty with? How about if their behaviors are addictive behaviors? What about if they're criminal? Before the pandemic, I was part of a group that of about 8 or 9 men, and we used to go to Prince Albert, to the federal penitentiary, and there we'd visit with inmates. Each one of us was given an inmate, and we'd visit about once a month. Now, I didn't agree with the behavior of the inmate that I was visiting with. In fact, he was a drug dealer. But could I accept him as a fellow human being made of the same sinful stuff as I was? Well, I moved on from behaviors to theological opinions. First, differing opinions within the church itself, like how and when would Jesus return? How about the sovereignty of God as opposed to the free will of man? How about the great divisions in the church between Roman Catholics and Protestants and Orthodox people? Let me throw just one more in that has been causing some divisiveness over the centuries: the ministry roles for women in the church. Finally, I talked about how we could accept people with theological opinions that definitely were not Christians. They would never consider themselves to be Christians. Could we accept Muslims? Could we accept Hindus and maybe even atheists? We can't compromise the biblical theological opinions we hold. The words of Jude come to mind. In Jude, the first chapter and the 3rd verse: "Dear friends, I've been eagerly planning to write to you about the salvation we all share, but now I find that I must write about something else, urging you to defend the faith that God has entrusted for all time to His holy people." We read that. Defend the faith. Peter also told us to always be ready to share the reason for the hope that we have. But I like that last sentence: but do it with gentleness and respect. Unfortunately, a number of Christians have taken these verses to mean that we are to do our best to attack and to destroy the opinions of other people. If our goal is simply to win an argument, then maybe this approach would be defensible. But if our ultimate goal is to help someone to see Jesus, to come to a place where they can trust Him, then we're defeating our purpose in our arguments. Let me just remind us that the reason that people take a specific theological position, now get ready for it. Are you ready? It's because they truly believe it's true. I don't think I've ever met anyone who said, well, I know this is wrong, but I choose to follow it anyway. Now, why would they believe an incorrect theology and follow it? Let me suggest it's because they've been deceived. Compassion, listening, and respect would be more effective at changing hearts and minds than attacking their arguments. I use the story of Nabil Qureshi and his friendship with David Woods to illustrate the point. The last 4 years have served to more deeply entrench people in their theological, their political, and their ethical positions. Political conservatives and liberals seem further apart than they've ever been. Conversations with people of the other political camp seem to be seen almost as betrayal. Before I go on, I want to just say to you that I'm not going to lay out any positions and say, these are right and these are wrong. I'm just going to mention them. And I'm going to talk about how we can accept each other and remain civil and remain respectful to each other. There are some things that we'll simply never agree on. Conservatives will have a difficult time finding common ground with Trudeau backing liberals, and the same can be said of Republicans and Democrats south of the border. We have to learn how to disagree without being disagreeable. We need to maintain our humility and say to ourselves, I could just be wrong. It's what we want other people to do for us, isn't it? So let me just mention some of the things besides politics that have raised our hackles over the last few years. How about starting right at the very top? Is the pandemic real? Has it been manufactured and used to manipulate people? Should we obey the government's dictates even if we disagree with them? Should we accept vaccines? What about the Black Lives Matter movement? Do they have legitimate complaints that we as people of faith should take seriously? Or is this just a covert attempt to subvert our society? Is there such a thing as systemic racism right here in Canada? One more. Are you ready? What about climate change? Merely mentioning the topic can change the climate of a conversation and a relationship. Well, take a moment and add your own issue to this. Let's begin with the reality that we will never all agree. Do you believe that? We'll never all agree. As Christians, there are doctrinal positions that we hold in common, but after that it becomes a bit of a free-for-all. I don't believe in many of these situations that I've mentioned that there is only one Christian position in any of the areas and that all the rest are non-Christian. I have met Christians who voted conservative and others who have voted for the Green Party. I've met Christians who believe that everybody should be vaccinated and those that believe that nobody should be vaccinated. Talk about a diversity of opinion. We see that in the pandemic and vaccines. So there are disagreements and there will be conflict. Did you hear that? There are disagreements and there will be conflict. So how do we resolve conflicts? Let me give you a few suggestions. Begin with humility. I've said it already. Say to yourself, I could be wrong. I could be. And another thing that we should include in that is this statement. It's not about me. None of us want to claim infallibility, but we sometimes act as though we believe it. Learn to listen. What is the other person actually saying? In counseling, it's often referred to as active listening. Repeating what the other person said to make sure that we have heard them correctly. It's saying something like, what I think I heard you say was, and then repeating what you thought you heard. Instead, we don't really listen. What we do is we wait for the other person to take a breath and then we jump back into the conversation so we can contribute our well thought out and definitely correct opinions. Remember I said a couple of weeks ago that we should listen in the same proportion as the number of ears we have to the number of mouths that we have. Listen twice as much as we speak. Always remember to attack the problem and not the person. If you're discussing the pandemic and vaccines, you each will have your own documented opinion, documented from your favorite news source, be it from Fox News or Huffington Post. Really, really listen to what the other person is saying. Are there areas of agreement? What is the best possible outcome for this conversation? Is it you winning the argument, or is it an area of disagreement just simply being clarified? With some people, the immediate response to a disagreement is anger. Do you relate to that at all? I can. Is the outcome you want winning an argument, or is it enhancing the relationship? Anger can stop the other person from speaking and maybe make you feel like you've won the argument, but it can destroy the relationship. Understand yourself is the next one. Look at yourself. Without using rose-colored glasses, what is it about that the other person is saying that's rubbing you the wrong way? Do you feel like you have to win the disagreement? One of the gifts that God gave me when I first became a Christian was just a simple question. Are you ready for it? It was the question, why? Whenever I did something, God would breathe that question into my ear. Why? Why are you doing that? Why do you believe what you're saying? Why? Finally, bring in the golden rule. Is the way you're reacting to the other person the way you'd want them to react to you and the way you want to be treated? As long as we live on this side of the grave, we will encounter areas of disagreement. We will have conflict. I believe it was Ruth Graham, wife of evangelist Billy Graham, who said if they agreed on absolutely everything, one of them wouldn't be necessary. We are going to disagree. Don't expect anything less. But how can we accept people with whom we disagree? Or will we be determined to only hang out with people that agree with us? Remember Paul's command to accept one another as Christ has accepted us. Would you pray with me? Father, you have accepted us. And some of our opinions are so far away from what is good for us. They're so far away from what you've said. But you accept us and you love us. Help us to use that acceptance as a model to accept the people you bring across our path. Help us, Lord, to be good ambassadors of Jesus Christ, for we ask it in his name. Amen.